Hey everyone! I've finished my first playthrough of Mario and Luigi Brothership, even having completed all the side quests. Now I get to address the questions you've been dying to have answered. What do I think of this game? What does it do best and where does it come up short? Is it a masterpiece? Let's jump in and find out. Right off the bat, let me revisit a couple things that I called out in my first impressions video. After a few hours of gameplay, I was concerned that Luigi was mostly CPU powered, and that too many puzzles involved waiting for Luigi to glow, then pressing the L button. Further, I found both the puzzles and the combat too easy. I'm glad to report that after completing the game, these concerns have mostly melted away. The puzzle and combat difficulty increased to a decent level, and many sequences require Luigi to be deployed and controlled in non-obvious ways. And as for performance, although there are times with frame rate dips, I find the performance to usually be okay and a non-issue for me. With that out of the way, I am going to run through a list of my top strengths and flaws for this game. These are just my opinions. Feel free to respectfully let me know in the comments where you agree or disagree, but don't get worked up. This is just for fun. Strength number 1. Island design. This game has a lot of islands, and for the most part, I am very happy with their design. Although the first few islands start off a little slow, sparse, and easy, that is just part of the game's very gradually increasing difficulty curve. What you do find as you progress through the game is an assortment of islands featuring all sorts of different themes. Rainforest, desert, fire, ice, urban, club, and Bowser's hideout, to name a few. The activities and puzzles on these islands are quite varied as well. On Desolate Island, you need to seek out the 4 idol members. On All Sand, you need to figure out how to distract some shark bones so you can grab some oil. My 2 favorites are Lotta Coins and Bulbfish. On Lotta Coins, you need to solve some tricky riddles in order to infiltrate the security in an office building. Whereas on Bulbfish, you get to play detective, trying to solve the mystery of the antisocial island residents, as well as who stole the Bulbfish eggs. Most islands are a good mix of combat and puzzle solving, each with their own unique themes and quirks. Now let's get to flaw number 1, sailing. I called this out in my first impressions video, and unfortunately, it never improved. Sailing is just an unnecessary mechanism for selecting an island, and fails to deliver any sense of exploration, like what was accomplished in Wind Waker. The problem is that the game is fairly linear, and so opens up one current to you at a time, which aside from the odd islet, only allows you to access the next island in the sequence. There is no real sense of adventure or discovery. But aside from being pointless, the sailing harms the flow of the game. If you have nothing else to do, you'll literally just have to do nothing and wait until Shipshape Island reaches the new location. When you learn the ability to fast sail, this helps a little, but the currents seem to become bigger and islands more spaced out, meaning there is still waiting involved. The game helps limit this pain by introducing the ability to instantly travel to already connected islands, but this does not apply to islets, Great Lighthouse Islands, or Mist Reefs. And speaking of reefs, these also fail to provide any sense of discovery, as their locations can all be spotted pretty easily by opening your sea map. I cannot name anything positive that the sailing mechanic brings to this game. Now back to strengths with number 2, story decisions. There are a few spots in the game where you're provided with a decision to make. Even though I just mentioned the linear sequence of islands, there are a couple exceptions. You get to choose the order of Twisty and Rainforest, as well as Scorching and Slip and Glide. On top of this, you get to make a decision as to whether Peach or Luigi gets abducted and brought to Lotta Coins Island. You get to choose where to obtain the supplies for Chilium's and Bernadette's wedding, and you get to choose whether to follow Technicky's or Daphne's plan for infiltrating Fortress Zocket. I know that personally, I perked up every time there was a decision to make. This is a great way to create engagement during what can otherwise be, at times, a long and boring story. It also encourages replay value to see what you missed out on by not choosing the other option. Which leads right into flaw number 2. Decisions are meaningless. It can be a bit of a disappointment to actually go back through the game and see that these decisions mostly amounted just to trivial differences. On my first playthrough, I sent Luigi to Lotta Coins Island, as the game had me believe this would be more difficult and that I may benefit in some way from doing this. I'm now on my second playthrough, and I sent Peach this time. Turns out, there is no advantage to sending Luigi. Other than a few minor cutscene differences, all it means is that Mario may do a handful of battles solo, which is only a disadvantage as Luigi is missing out on the experience points. Same thing with the wedding planning. Although you do face some straightforward battles by choosing Shun's plan, everything other than minor cosmetics turns out the same for the wedding and afterwards. And it's similar too for Technicky and Daphne. It doesn't really matter which you choose. It would do more for the replay value if these decisions had a greater impact in the game. If it's more difficult to send Luigi to Lotta coins, then perhaps you should be rewarded with an additional item, or the ability to make something else easier down the line. Perhaps the wedding could turn out differently, or even get called off, if you go after Shun's supplies. Any changes that would make these decisions feel important and provide some sort of lasting impact would be an improvement to me. And now for strength number 3, visuals. I highlighted this in my first impressions video, and I still think it's true, so I'll call it out again. The comic book inspired visuals in this game are stunning. The environments are so colorful, and the characters are so animated and expressive. I found it enjoyable to watch many of the cutscenes for no reason other than to see the expressions on Mario's and Luigi's faces. I would prefer that the NPCs were more than just glorified toasters to allow for the same depth of facial expression. But despite this, I still think the visuals are a huge triumph for this game. Let's flip back to flaws with number 3, dialogue volume. I get that RPGs tend to be wordy with a lot of dialogue, but despite this, I still find that Brothership goes a bit overboard here. Of course, in the early game, your gameplay is frequently interrupted to handhold you through something, but the early game is really more of a tutorial as the difficulty curve slowly ramps up. As you progress deeper into the game, the dialogue volume remains high. Much of the dialogue could have been more concise or removed entirely. Unwanted cutscenes will often trigger, showing me something of little interest, like Connie receiving mittens from her mentor. I tend to dread actually connecting an island to shipshape, as almost inevitably, it's going to trigger a long sequence of dialogue, and some real time is going to pass before I can hop back into playing the game. In support of the game, it does help here by making some cutscenes skippable and providing a fast-forward function the rest of the time, but I wish more cutscenes were skippable and that the fast-forward function went much faster. On my second playthrough, I'm trying to get through the dialogue as quickly as possible, but it's still slow, and the fast-forward function is awkward. To go at maximum speed, it seems I need to hold down B while mashing A, which is an unnatural way to use the controller. Back to strengths with number 4, side quest battles. The game developers obviously don't want to make the base game too hard and block progression for some players, which is why I think it was a brilliant move to offload some challenging battles into side quests. Now of course, the difficulty will drop if you delay the side quest until you level up more, but if you take on each side quest as soon as it becomes available, as I did, each battle side quest will provide a good challenge. You get to refight more difficult versions of the first 3 Great Lighthouse bosses, as well as the Shark Bone, which appeared undefeatable when you first encountered it, and even a handful of base enemies that have mutated to have super stats. These high-stat enemies often require a clever approach to get through the battle, whereas the enhanced bosses are quite the grind, requiring near mastery in dodging their attacks to survive. These side quest battles were fun, and for me, provided a good punch of difficulty that was scarcely found in the base game. And this flows into flaw number 4, the rest of the side quests. As much as I enjoyed the side quest battles, I unfortunately can't say anything nice about the other side quests. I am a completionist at heart, so I made the decision to complete each side quest as soon as it popped up, mostly because I was worried about one becoming unavailable from the story advancing. I quickly started dreading connecting an island, just because I would have a new round of side quests to complete. With very few exceptions, the side quests were just busy work. No mini-games, no puzzles, no challenge. Just backtracking and talking to people flagged on my map. This really felt like filler content. I know that it's all optional, but at some point, I think no content is better than low-quality content. And what is disappointing is that it didn't need to be this way. The game does have some interesting puzzles floating around on some of the islets. My favorite is the ice block puzzle on Compact Islet. This one is actually surprisingly challenging. Puzzles such as these could have been used in side quests. The main game features what feels like an endless number of dance-offs with Diode. Why not demote these to side quest content, both removing padding from a long main game while making side quests more interesting? And as I mentioned, the battles were fantastic. They could have done more of these. But as is, the bulk of the side quest content just isn't enjoyable for me. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. It'll really help the channel out. Okay, now for strength number 5, Battle System. Brothership really shines when it comes to its battle system. You've got your basic jump and hammer attacks, requiring simple button sequences to inflict maximum damage. Then there are the Bros moves, some really creative and fun moves that inflict more damage but require more complex sequences of button presses. Some Bros moves damage a single enemy, while others damage all enemies. Some damage all enemies but do a disproportionate amount of damage to a single enemy. All of this makes it very situational to determine which move is the best to perform at a particular time. Each enemy is delightfully unique, having its own attacks and patterns. All enemy attacks can be dodged or countered, meaning you will stay engaged throughout each battle, and the game will call on your skill and reflexes. And as the game progresses, the enemies become trickier to dodge, meaning it can take a fair bit of study to master a particular enemy. On top of all this, there is the Battle Plug system, giving you special effects or abilities during battle, sometimes with a disproportionate special effect if you combine multiple plugs in the right way. Each plug will run out of energy and require some number of turns to recharge, which just further adds to the strategy of determining which plugs to equip at any given time. One minor complaint is it can be taxing to try too hard to optimize the plugs. Sometimes you'll be tempted to unequip all your plugs, as you know one standard attack is enough to end the battle. At other times, you'll be tempted to use a plug to drain its energy and start its recharge counter, when it otherwise doesn't make sense to use it. But most of the time, it's best not to stress about perfect plug management. The game will still be plenty fair and beatable, even with some optimizations left on the table. Other than that, Brothership has all the classic elements you'd expect in an RPG. A level-up system, various types of gear and accessories that affect your stats in different ways, and a catalog of items that you can use in battle. I can't really identify anything that I'd change about Brothership's battle system. And this brings us to flaw number 5, game length. My first playthrough of Brothership took 46 hours to complete, including all the side quests. It's a long game. Sure, maybe not as long as some others, but context is everything. The problem I have with Brothership's length has more to do with how it achieves that length. Side quests aside, which I already touched on, the main quest is padded, with a bunch of content that serves only to make the game less enjoyable, in my opinion. For example, having Connie run off each time you're about to blast off to a great lighthouse island, just having to do some tedious backtracking to find her, adds absolutely nothing of value to the game. Still, the game mostly holds it together up until the third great lighthouse. This is where things start to take a nosedive. If you're sensitive to spoilers, beware that I will be talking through the final sequence of the game here. Before reaching the third great lighthouse, you need to find supplies for and attend Chilliam's and Bernadette's wedding. Finding the supplies is tedious, requiring backtracking, and the wedding is a time sink. It also feels strangely out of place narrative-wise when, you're supposed to be saving the world. Things get wacky after completing the third great lighthouse, as the game requires you to revisit and reconnect Twisty and Heat Freeze islands. Yep, instead of having interesting new islands to explore, you have to reconnect old islands. And aside from a few battles and one cave on Heat Freeze, there is very little that is new or of interest on these islands. It mostly feels like backtracking and length padding. After a return trip, albeit an interesting one, to Off and On Island, you then reach Bowser's Castle, which has a very penultimate feel to it. After clearing the castle, you're off to the fourth great lighthouse, which should be a real challenge and nearly the end of the game, right? Not really. The fourth lighthouse has almost no content and is trivial to light up. What a confusing change of pace for the game. From here, you blast off to Fortress Zocket to confront Zocket and the Extension Core. Is this the end of the game? Nope. You get a second battle against Bowser instead. You then end up on Conductor Island with nothing much of interest or challenge. Then shortly after, reach Jellyfish Island. Although the atmosphere of Jellyfish is charming, there are no battles here, and aside from a small pizza-making game, nothing of interest to do. After connecting Jellyfish, you'll be returning to Bowser's Castle, albeit with some new rooms, to get a part of his airship. Then we'll finally be returning to Fortress Zocket, this time to actually battle the Extension Core, Zocket, and complete the game. Progressing through the fortress this time has a sense of finality. It is long, with some tricky puzzles and advanced enemies. You finally get to battle all 3 members of the Extension Corps, and after defeating them, you're off to Zocket. The battle against Zocket has the atmosphere of a final boss battle, and after coming up victorious, you'll see that instead of the credits rolling, there is a giant egg hatching behind where Zocket was. This is Reclusa. Okay, if you were paying attention to the story, maybe this isn't a surprise. Just one more battle before the credits roll, right? Unfortunately not. You end up escaping back to an apocalyptic ship-shape island, and instead of having a battle with Reclusa, you now need to backtrack all over the place, filling up a watering can with 6 bonds. For me, this was easily the worst part of the game. After expecting the game to be over, I instead had to do extensive backtracking with lots of dialogue, with only a mildly interesting battle and new cave to explore sprinkled here and there. It was a huge letdown, and I was ready for the game to end. After collecting all my bonds, I blasted off to the Solitary, and personally, found this area more time-consuming and less interesting to explore than Fortress Zocket. When it seemed I was finally going to fight Reclusa, I ended up stuck in a virtual reality of Peach's castle's courtyard. A neat idea, but at this point, it just felt like extra padding. I eventually got to battle Reclusa and end the game, but all this left a sour taste in my mouth. If you enjoyed the lead up to Reclusa on your playthrough, then that's fantastic. Maybe it's just a me problem. I found from Chilium's and Bernadette's wedding and onwards, the game felt like it contained as much padding and backtracking as it did new content. The enjoyable flow established by the game of linking new and interesting islands, then taking on a challenging great lighthouse, was totally disrupted, and I found the rest of the game unpredictable and out of rhythm. In my opinion, this is a case where less could have been more. Just strip out the backtracking and padding, and deliver a leaner and more enjoyable game. On balance, I find Brothership to be a highly enjoyable game. It does a lot of things well, and I'm happy to have played it through. But it has some significant flaws that, in my opinion, hold it back from being a masterpiece. My rating for Brothership is a 7 out of 10. Let me know respectfully in the comments below where you agree or disagree. And if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. I have some interesting challenge ideas for this game that I plan to release in the coming weeks. Bye for now.